They found his footprints after the fire, not around the house, not near the road, but inside the ash. Perfect, bare, human, as if someone had walked calmly through flames that melted iron and erased names, and then stopped, right at the center of what used to be the main hall. No exit prints, no body, just presence. In 1893, a plantation in rural Louisiana burned to the ground in a single night. No lightning, no storm, no survivors who could explain what happened inside. The official report said it was an accident. Most people believed that. But the land didn't. The locals refused to go near it after dark. Even decades later, children were warned not to speak the name of the place aloud. They called it Stillhouse. Not because something remained, but because something never left. Records from the county archives are incomplete. Names scratched out. Dates rewritten. Entire pages missing. But one detail repeats over and over in different handwriting. A slave, listed without a proper name, only a mark, a symbol that doesn't belong to any known registry. He was never sold, never freed, never buried. And according to what little survived, he was still there after everything else was gone. What makes this story different is not the fire, not the plantation, not even the silence that followed. It's the fact that multiple witnesses, spanning nearly 40 years, claimed to see the same man standing on the ruins, unburned, unaged, watching. This is not a story about slavery alone. This is about what happens when a system builds something it can't control, and then tries to erase it. Stillhouse Plantation did not exist on official maps until 1871, and even then it appeared suddenly. No land records before that year, no purchase agreements, no ownership trail that made sense. Just a name, and a boundary drawn like it had always been there. But local church logs tell a different story. Entries from as early as 1832 mention a working estate deep in the marshlands where sermons were requested but never attended. A place where people lived but didn't come into town. A place where shipments left but no one ever saw them arrive. It was described as quiet, too quiet. No laughter, no shouting, no sound of life you'd expect from a plantation. Even the animals avoided the property line. When the first official census was taken there, something strange appeared. There were fewer names than bodies. Workers were counted, but not identified. And among them, one entry stood out. A single individual listed separately. Not under the owner, not under the laborers. Just alone, marked as unassigned. The plantation owner, a man named Elias Mercer, was known in nearby towns, but rarely seen. When he did appear, people described him as distracted, like he was always listening to something no one else could hear. He donated heavily to the church, but never allowed clergy onto his land. And then there were the deliveries. Crates arriving at night, no markings, no invoices, and never opened in front of others. But the most unsettling detail came from a journal written by a traveling surveyor in 1848. He wrote, "The land does not feel owned. It feels occupied, as if something older than the house is deciding who stays and who doesn't." Stillhouse wasn't built like other plantations. It wasn't grown. It was placed, and whatever was inside it was already there before anyone else arrived. The first direct mention of him appears in a damaged ledger dated 1856. No name, no age, no origin, just a description written in uneven ink. He does not respond. Other entries follow. Short, uneasy, repetitive. Does not eat with others. Does not sleep at night. Does not bleed. That last line is underlined 3 times. Workers claimed he never spoke. Not once. Not even when beaten.
not even when left in isolation. But the most disturbing detail wasn't his silence. It was his stillness. Several accounts describe him standing in the same place for hours, sometimes days. Not restrained, not forced, just unmoving, eyes open, facing nothing. One overseer wrote, "I placed a hand before his face. No blink, no breath on my skin, but I know he sees me. I know it." Attempts to sell him failed. Buyers refused. Some claimed they felt sick standing near him. Others said they heard whispering when they got too close. Not from him, but from behind him. And then came the punishments. Because men like Elias Mercer believed everything could be broken. He was whipped, starved, locked underground. But every morning, he was back, standing in a different place. Clean, unmarked. One entry, written hastily and later scratched out, reads, "He is not one of ours." After that, records become inconsistent. Mentions of him disappear for months, then return suddenly, as if someone couldn't stop writing about him. And always the same conclusion. No matter what was done to him, he remained. In 1862, during the height of the Civil War, something changed at Stillhouse. Deliveries stopped, workers stopped leaving, and the plantation closed its gates entirely. From that point forward, no one entered without permission, and no one who entered ever spoke about what they saw. But one man did, a carpenter hired to repair structural damage after a storm. His account was never meant to be public. It was found decades later, hidden inside a church wall. He described a space beneath the main house, not a cellar, not storage, something else. A room built before the foundation, stone walls older than the plantation itself, no windows, no natural light, and at the center, a chair, not for comfort, for holding. Around it, symbols carved deep into the stone, not Christian, not African, not anything he recognized. And standing in that room was the man, not bound, not restrained, just standing there, facing the chair. The carpenter wrote, "The air felt thick, like it didn't want to move. I tried to speak, but my voice didn't come out. And he turned, slowly, like he heard something I didn't." That was the moment he noticed something worse. There were marks on the walls, scratches, deep, layer over layer, as if someone had tried to claw their way out, for years. But all of them stopped at the same height, the same level as the man's hands. And then he realized, the scratches weren't made by him, they were made by others, trying to reach him. The carpenter left that same day. He refused payment, and within a week, he stopped speaking entirely. No one agrees on how the fire started. Some say it began in the fields, others say inside the house, but every account shares one detail. There was no panic, no screaming, no running, no chaos, just silence. A nearby farmer, nearly a mile away, reported seeing the flames rise higher than the trees. But what disturbed him most wasn't the fire, it was the way it moved. He described it as controlled, deliberate, like it was following a path. Witnesses claim the house burned from the inside out, windows glowing first, then walls collapsing inward, as if something at the center was pulling everything down with it. And then, it stopped. Not faded, not died out, stopped, as if whatever caused it had decided it was enough. When authorities arrived the next morning, they found no survivors, no remains that could be clearly identified, just ash, and fragments of things that didn't make sense, chains fused into shapes that didn't match smartwitch or form, wood that refused to crumple, and at the center, those footprints, leading into the ruins, and stopping. No exit, no body. But one officer wrote something in his private notes that never made it into the official report. He claimed that while standing in the center of the ash, he felt watched, not from a distance, not from the trees, from directly in front of him. He said, "I stepped back, and for a moment, I swear, I saw the outline of a man where the footprints ended, not in the fire, not in the smoke, but in the space between." The plantation was declared destroyed, the land abandoned, but people who passed by years later would still report the same thing. A figure, standing, exactly where the footprints stopped, and never leaving.
After the fire, the land should have gone quiet. That's what usually happens. Places forget. Ash settles, names disappear. Time smooths everything out. But Stillhouse didn't forget. In 1898, 5 years after the fire, a railway company attempted to survey the land for expansion. They never completed the route. 3 workers reported the same thing on separate days. They heard footsteps, not behind them, not ahead of them, but matching them perfectly. When they stopped, the footsteps didn't. The official explanation was fatigue. The project was abandoned shortly after. But the most disturbing account came from a young engineer named Thomas Hale. He wrote in his field journal, "The ground feels wrong. Not unstable, but aware, as if it knows where you step before you do." He also noted something else, something that never made it into official records. He found markings in the soil. Not fresh, not recent, old, burned into the earth itself. The same symbol that had appeared in the plantation ledger, the one assigned to the man without a name. Thomas attempted to sketch it, but every time he tried, he made mistakes. Lines shifted, shapes didn't connect, until finally he wrote, "It does not want to be copied." He left the site the next morning. His resignation letter contained only one sentence: "This place already belongs to something." The nearest church to Stillhouse had records going back nearly a century. Baptisms, marriages, deaths. Everything documented. Everything preserved. Except anything related to the plantation. Entire years were missing. Pages torn cleanly from the binding, as if removed with care, not destroyed in panic. But one record survived, hidden between unrelated entries, written in a different hand. A confession. It wasn't signed, but the tone made one thing clear. Whoever wrote it was afraid. We were asked to bless the land, not the house, the ground beneath it. The entry goes on to describe a visit made by 2 priests in 1841. They were invited by Elias Mercer himself. But what they found wasn't a place of worship. It was already one. The writer describes descending beneath the house, seeing the stone chamber, the chair, the symbols, and the man, standing exactly where he had always been. They attempted a prayer, a simple one, something safe, something familiar. But before they could finish, the air changed. The writer describes it as pressure, like being deep underwater. And then, the man moved. Not toward them, not away, but slightly. Just enough to break his stillness. And that was enough. One priest collapsed. The other refused to speak for the rest of his life. The confession ends with a final line. We were not blessing the land. We were being shown why it could not be. In 1907, despite warnings and local fear, a family purchased the Stillhouse land. The Carters. A father, a mother, and 2 children. They claimed they didn't believe in stories, said the land was cheap, said fear was just another kind of ignorance. They built a small home near the ruins, not directly on them, but close enough to see where the house once stood. At first, everything seemed normal. Letters sent to relatives described quiet nights, fertile soil, and a sense of strange peace. But the tone changed quickly. A letter from Mrs. Carter, dated October 3rd, reads, "There is someone here. I don't mean nearby, I mean here. I feel it most when the house is silent." Another, weeks later. The children talk to someone outside at night. They say he doesn't answer, but they know he's listening.
The final letter was never sent. It was found inside the house years later. It reads, "He stands where the old house was. Every night. Closer each time. Not walking. Just closer." When authorities arrived months later, the house was empty. No signs of struggle. No signs of escape. The table was set for dinner. Food untouched. Chairs slightly pulled back, as if the family had stood up at the same time and left together. Outside, near the ruins, they found footprints. 4 sets, leading toward the center and stopping. The symbol connected to the man appears again and again across different records, but never the same way twice. Sometimes it looks like a broken circle, sometimes like intersecting lines that don't meet properly, sometimes like something unfinished. But every attempt to preserve it fails. Photographs blur, ink fades, carvings erode faster than expected. Even memory doesn't hold it. People who claim to have seen it often described forgetting it moments later, like trying to remember a dream that doesn't want to stay. In 1923, a professor of early American folklore attempted to document the symbol after hearing multiple accounts. He spent weeks studying the land, interviewing locals, sketching variations. But his final report contains no drawings, only this statement: "It is not a symbol meant to represent something. It is something trying to be represented." Shortly after publishing his findings, he withdrew them, claimed they were incorrect, and refused to speak about the subject again. His personal notes, discovered after his death, contained a single repeated sentence: "It is not him that is trapped there." History records systems, structures, ownership, control. But sometimes, something exists outside of all of it. The man at Stillhouse was never listed as property in the traditional sense. He wasn't bought, wasn't sold, wasn't transferred. He was simply there. And everything else was built around him. Overseers tried to command him, failed. Owners tried to break him, failed. Even the fire didn't remove him, because he was never part of what burned. A recovered note, believed to be written by Elias Mercer himself, offers the closest thing to an explanation. It reads, "We did not bring him here. We found him, and we made the mistake of believing he was like the others." The note continues, but much of it is damaged. One fragment remains legible. "The room was not built to hold him. It was built to hold what answers him." And then the final line: "If he ever leaves that place, it will not be because he is free." For decades, people believed the story ended with the fire, that whatever happened at Stillhouse stayed buried beneath it. But they were wrong, because something was never destroyed, never removed, never even disturbed. It was simply waiting. And it still is.
By the 1930s, Stillhouse had become something people avoided without needing to be told why. No fences, no guards, just absence. But in 1934, a group of 4 men decided to dig beneath the ruins. They weren't historians. They weren't locals. They were hired by someone who never gave a name. The instructions were simple: find the stone chamber and go deeper. It took them 3 days to uncover the original foundation, the same stone described in the carpenter's account decades earlier. But something didn't match. The chamber floor wasn't solid. There were seams, perfect lines, too precise to be natural. When they forced it open, they found a second layer, older, darker, and beneath that, another room, not built, carved. The walls were uneven, not by poor craftsmanship, but by intention, as if something had been removed from the earth itself to create the space. At the center of that lower room, there was no chair, no symbols, only a hollow, a depression in the ground, roughly human-shaped, but too long, too narrow. And surrounding it were the same scratch marks seen in the upper chamber, only deeper, more violent, as if whatever had been there didn't try to escape upward. It tried to escape into the ground. One of the workers refused to go back down after seeing it. He said the air felt wrong, like breathing something that wasn't meant for lungs. The others continued. They shouldn't have. On the fourth day, one of the men, Samuel Rigg, reported hearing something while inside the lower chamber. Not a voice, not exactly. He described it as a pattern, a repetition, like something trying to form words, but failing. At first, it was faint, almost easy to ignore, but it didn't stay that way. It got clearer, not louder, clearer, as if his mind was adjusting to it, learning it. He began repeating the sounds out loud without realizing it. The others noticed, asked him to stop. He didn't respond. He just stood there, looking at the hollow in the ground, and speaking something that wasn't a language. They pulled him out, forced him back to the surface, but even outside, he didn't stop. For hours he continued, until finally, he went silent and smiled, not with relief, not with understanding, but with recognition. That night he disappeared. No footsteps, no signs of struggle, just gone. The next morning they found something at the center of the ruins, a new set of footprints, bare, standing exactly where the others always ended. The remaining workers wanted to leave, immediately, but they couldn't, because the man who hired them finally arrived. No name, no introduction, just presence. He walked directly to the excavation site, didn't ask questions, didn't hesitate, and when he looked into the lower chamber, he nodded, as if confirming something he already knew. One of the workers asked what they had found. The man answered simply, a boundary, nothing more. He then gave a new instruction, seal it, not with wood, not with stone, but with the original floor, exactly as it was. No changes, no markings, no signs it had ever been opened. The workers argued, said it wasn't safe, said something was wrong. The man didn't respond. He just looked at them, and one by one, they stopped speaking. Later accounts from the surviving workers described the same feeling. Not fear, not pressure, but certainty, like the decision had already been made, and they were just catching up to it. They sealed the chamber, left the site, and never returned. The man stayed behind. No one saw him leave. After 1934, reports from Stillhouse became less frequent, but they didn't stop. They changed. Instead of sightings, there were patterns. Animals refusing to cross certain areas, compasses shifting direction briefly, then correcting themselves, people losing track of time, minutes turning into hours, hours into nothing at all. But the most consistent report came from those who passed by at night. They saw him, not always clearly, not always fully, but enough, standing at the center, exactly where the footprints ended. And sometimes, there was something else, not beside him, not behind him, below him, a distortion, a darkness that didn't match the absence of light, something that seemed deeper than the ground itself. Witnesses described feeling a pull, not physical, something quieter, like a thought that didn't belong to them, suggesting, inviting, not to approach, but to stay, longer than they should. There is no official conclusion to the Stillhouse case, no final report, no closed file, because it was never treated as something that could be finished, only contained. Scattered documents, personal notes, and erased records all point to the same realization. The man was never the subject. He was the sign, the marker, the point where something else touched the surface. The chamber beneath the plantation wasn't built to imprison. It was built to define, to create a boundary between what was understood and what wasn't. And the man, he stood at that boundary, not guarding it, not trapped by it, but connected to it. Every attempt to remove him failed, because he wasn't separate from the place. He was part of it. And the fire wasn't destruction. It was correction. Something went wrong. Something tried to interfere. And the system fixed itself, but not completely. Because the boundary still exists. The man is still seen. And the ground still remembers. There is one final note, found in an unmarked archive box. No date, no author. It contains only a single sentence. Do not try to understand why it stays. Ask instead, why it hasn't moved. And maybe the most unsettling part of all, no one has ever reported seeing him leave. In 1947, something changed. Not at Stillhouse itself, but in the kind of people it began to attract. Until then, most who came near the land did so by accident. Curiosity, work, disbelief. But in 1947, someone came with intent. His name was recorded once, Daniel Cross, not a historian, not a priest, but a man who had spent years studying patterns in forgotten places, disappearances, unfinished records, locations that seemed to resist explanation. Stillhouse wasn't the first, but it was the last. His notes, recovered from a locked case decades later, show a clear progression. At first, he treated the place like a puzzle, something to solve. But over time, his language changed. Less about discovery, more about acceptance. One entry reads, "It is not hiding. It is waiting for someone who understands what it is." Another, "The man is not a victim. He is a condition." Daniel didn't arrive at Stillhouse unprepared. He came alone, at night. And unlike others, he didn't hesitate. He walked directly to the center of the ruins and stepped exactly where the footprints always ended. There were no witnesses to what happened that night. But Daniel left something behind. A recorder. Old. Mechanical. Worn. It was found weeks later, half buried near the site. Still intact. Still working. What it captured has never been fully released, but fragments remain. At first, it's just wind. Then footsteps. Calm. Measured. Stopping. Then silence. A long silence. And then a second set of footsteps. Not approaching. Not circling. Appearing. Right in front of him. Daniel speaks once. Quietly. "I know what you are." There is no response. But something changes. The air shifts. The recording distorts. And then a sound begins. Not loud, not sharp, but layered. Multiple tones overlapping. Like something trying to form meaning without using words. Daniel doesn't speak again, but his breathing changes. Slower, deeper, matching something. Not around him, in front of him. And then, for a brief moment, there is another sound. A voice. Not his, not human, but close enough to almost understand. The recording ends immediately after. When Daniel's case was reviewed, authorities returned to Stillhouse. Not because they expected to find him, but because something didn't match. The recorder wasn't where it should have been. It was closer to the edge of the ruins, as if something had moved it. They searched the area, carefully, and then they saw it. For the first time in recorded history, the footprints didn't stop. They continued. 2 sets. One familiar, bare. The other, booted, walking side by side, from the center of the ruins, toward the tree line. And then, gone. No return. No second path. Just departure. For decades, the defining rule of Stillhouse had been simple. Nothing leaves. But now, something had. And worse, it hadn't left alone. After 1947, sightings at Stillhouse changed again. The figure was still reported, still seen standing at the center, unmoving, unchanged. But something was different. There were moments, brief, unconfirmed, where he wasn't there. Seconds, maybe longer, gaps, absences that didn't make sense, as if the place itself was adjusting, trying to account for something missing, or something added. Reports from nearby towns increased, people hearing sounds in empty fields, seeing figures where no one should be, standing still, watching, not threatening, not moving, just present, and in rare cases, walking, always in pairs. There is no official statement about what happened to Daniel Cross. No body, no confirmation,
But his final note was found inside the recorder case. Folded. Hidden. As if meant to be discovered only after everything else. It reads, "I was wrong about one thing. It was never contained. The man is not the boundary. He is the door." And then, the final line, "And doors do not stay closed forever." Today, Stillhouse is still marked as abandoned land. No development. No ownership. Just space. Untouched. But people who pass near it still report something strange. Not always a figure. Not always footprints. Sometimes, just a feeling that they've stopped somewhere they weren't meant to, and that if they stay too long, something might notice. Not immediately, not clearly, but eventually, because whatever stood at Stillhouse was never destroyed, never freed, never understood. It simply waited.